Give someone 8 hours to finish a task, and it takes exactly 8 hours. Give the same person 2 hours for the exact same task, and somehow it still gets done. Nothing about the task changed, not the difficulty, not the amount of work required. Only one thing changed: the time they were given, and that one detail was enough to completely change how long it actually took them to finish. This isn't a coincidence, and it isn't about motivation or willpower. It's a documented pattern, first identified in 1955 by a British historian named Cyril Parkinson. He noticed it so consistently across offices and institutions that it eventually became known simply as Parkinson's Law. Work expands to fill the time available for its completion. Not sometimes, not occasionally, almost every single time without exception. Parkinson spent years studying government offices, and he found something strange. A task that should have taken 20 minutes, a simple letter, a short report, would somehow stretch to fill an entire afternoon. Not because the task got harder, simply because an entire afternoon was available for it. The work didn't get better with more time, it just got slower, padded out, with unnecessary steps and second thoughts. Once you understand this pattern, you start noticing it everywhere in your own life. It's deciding how long your emails take to write, even the short ones. It's deciding how long your projects drag on, even the simple ones. It's even deciding how long it takes you to get ready in the morning. Because somehow, on a rushed day, you still make it out the door on time. So why does this happen? Here's the actual mechanism behind it. When you're given a lot of time for something, your brain doesn't relax because it's being efficient. It relaxes because the situation simply feels safe. There's no immediate pressure, no sense that anything urgent needs to happen right now. And the moment that feeling of safety sets in, your natural sense of urgency quietly disappears along with it. Without urgency pushing you forward, small distractions start creeping into the work. You check one more message that could have waited. You rewrite a sentence that was already perfectly fine. You take a short break you didn't actually need yet. None of these individual moments feel like procrastination while they're happening. Each one feels completely reasonable and harmless on its own, just a small pause. But add all of those small pauses together across an entire day, and something interesting happens. They exactly fill whatever extra time you were originally given for the task. This isn't laziness in the way we usually think about it. Your brain is simply calibrating how much effort to spend based on the deadline in front of you, not based on how much work the task actually requires. This explains something almost everyone has experienced firsthand. A 10-page paper written the night before it's due somehow gets finished in 3 intensely focused hours. Give that same student 3 full weeks to write it instead, and it would have taken 3 full days of actual work, spread out, delayed, and dragged across the entire available window, simply because the window was there to fill. This same pattern quietly wastes enormous amounts of time inside workplaces every single day. Take a meeting scheduled for exactly 1 hour. Even when every important point gets fully covered in the first 15 minutes, the meeting almost never ends early. Nobody suggests wrapping up sooner. It would feel strange, almost wrong, to leave 45 minutes of scheduled time unused so the conversation simply expands to fill it. The same thing happens with entire projects. Give a team 1 full month to complete something, and it will take exactly 1 month, even when the core, essential work could realistically be finished in a single focused week. Where does the remaining 3 weeks go? It gets absorbed into extra meetings, unnecessary revisions, and second-guessing decisions that were already good enough the first time around. This is exactly why the most effective, highest performing teams do something that sounds almost counterintuitive. They deliberately give themselves less time than they think they actually need, not to create panic or unnecessary stress, but because a tighter timeline strips away all the extra space where inefficiency naturally hides, the padding, the hesitation, the unnecessary meetings that would otherwise fill up a looser schedule. This principle reaches far beyond the workplace into your personal life as well. Think about a completely free Saturday with nothing planned. Strangely, it often produces less than a single busy Tuesday packed with obligations. Without any real structure imposed on the day, the hours simply expand to absorb themselves, disappearing into small, unplanned activities that don't add up to anything meaningful by evening. This also explains why people with the least amount of free time in their lives often end up accomplishing the most. It's not because they possess some kind of superhuman energy or willpower that everyone else lacks. It's because tight constraints force real decisions to get made quickly instead of allowing attention to slowly drift from one minor task to another without any clear sense of priority. And this is precisely why goals without any real deadline attached to them so rarely get finished. The word someday isn't actually a deadline at all. It's simply an open calendar with no defined edges anywhere on it. Work without clear edges around it doesn't stay contained. It simply never fills in, drifting further into the future every time you glance at it and think later. So the real problem was never actually a lack of available time, even though that's usually how it feels in the moment. The real problem was always a lack of a container, a clear, defined boundary around the task that forces it to take shape within a fixed space, instead of expanding endlessly outward into however much time happens to be sitting there unused. So here's exactly how to turn this law in your favor starting today. First, give every task on your list an artificial deadline that feels slightly shorter than comfortable. Not impossible to hit, just tight enough that there's no extra room left for slack to quietly creep in. Second, work backward from that new deadline instead of forward from your usual to-do list. Ask yourself exactly what absolutely must happen for this task to be genuinely finished by that tighter deadline, and be willing to cut everything else that doesn't directly serve that outcome. Third, and just as important, protect that deadline the same way you would protect an important meeting with someone you deeply respect, because in this case, you are that important person and your time matters just as much. This a simple shift, deliberately giving yourself less time on purpose, turns out to be one of the most effective productivity tools available, precisely because it doesn't try to fight against human nature. Instead, it works directly with it using the exact same mechanism that normally wastes your time to actively work in your favor instead, almost effortlessly once the habit is in place. So, here's a question genuinely worth sitting with about anything currently sitting on your plate right now. Is this task actually taking as long as it seems to be taking? Or is it simply filling up whatever amount of time you happen to give it in the first place? Try cutting the time in half on your very next task just to see what actually happens. You might discover you never truly needed all that extra time to begin with. This is just one idea pulled from one often overlooked book. Out of thousands of books most people will never actually sit down and read. Every single week, I break down one lesson that's genuinely worth your time. If this one was useful to you today, go ahead and subscribe. The next idea might be exactly the one you needed to hear.